now it is the turn of Citlali Sanchez, who is going to do the next presentation. Please, Citlali.
All right, well, thank you very much for coming this morning. I'm going to talk about some of the implications of international large-scale assessments, specifically ICCS, and I'll give you a little bit of background. For applications in, for instance, citizenship curriculum reforms. Specifically, I'm going to use the example of Mexico, the country where I'm from, but also this information would apply to any other country, any other of the participant countries in this study. So the presentation is divided into different elements. The purpose, a little bit of background. For those of you who are not all that familiarized with ICCS, I will tell you briefly what it is, what it is about. A little bit of numbers to give you context on the country, some historical background of civic education in Mexico, and some implications in 3 different levels. So the purpose of this presentation is to discuss how Mexico's participation in 2 of the cycles of ICCS, which are 2009 and 16, unfortunately not 22, for political reasons, which I will not get into, how these results have contributed to 3 levels of information: national educational discourse, then to trends in the current national research, and policy and decision-making regarding the Public Education Secretariat, aka Ministry of Education. That's the official name of the Secretariat. So what are the implications? Just to set a little bit of background, civic knowledge and citizenship has become a gateway for educators to help prepare young students to acquire a certain set of skills, knowledge, and attitudes that will help them understand what citizenship is, engage with it or in it, and participate as future citizens of society that will construct in the future a democratic decision-making society. So many studies, here I mentioned a few, have shown that if schools foster an open democratic setting, for instance, openness for discussion within the classroom, with teachers within the school, it will be very beneficial for students to engage and to acquire this set of skills and a positive civic attitudes. So ICCS, International Civic and Citizenship Education Study, which is coordinated by the IEA, it investigates how countries prepare the students to be future citizens in the 21st century. Specifically, data is collected from students in the 8th grade, which have an average age of 13 and a half, 14 years, are 14 years old. So it collects data on the level of knowledge and understanding that these students have of civics and citizenship, if it is or not in the curriculum, if it's cross-curricular, or if it's a specific subject matter, which is the case in Mexico. Their attitudes, perceptions, and activities related to civics, but it also collects information about teachers' perceptions and attitudes, and school principals' opinions. So in the 2016 cycle, 24 countries participated, including Italy, of course, and Mexico. So just to give you a little bit of information, some numbers to show you how the level of complexity of Mexico. We are around 127 million citizens, according to the last census, which is every 10 years, and the last one was in 2020. And yes, it was during the pandemic, and it was very complicated for the National Statistical Institute to do this census. So around a quarter of the population are students, which are now studying in the basic and compulsory educational system includes K-12, so there's 3 years for kindergarten or preschool, 6 years of what we call primary school, 3 years of secondary or middle school, and 3 years of high school. So in total we have 15 years of basic and compulsory education. We have 1.6 million teachers in the country in public and private schools, and 250,000 schools. So of course we do not cense. We sample with each study, each national study, and the collected data for ICCS 2016 cycle includes 5,500 students, 1,900 teachers within 213 schools. Some iconic moments in the history of civic and citizenship education in Mexico turns us back to the 19th century, when Mexico was born as an independent country in 1910. So in the beginning of this century, the emphasis on the curriculum was very nationalist for obvious reasons. And at the beginning of the 20th century, it transitioned into the formal teaching of specific topics that were oriented towards what public life should be as citizens, how the government was constituted into different layers and different functions, and about politics. So it was very, very normative. And then it became, it developed into a specific subject matter within the curriculum, which was called citizenship education, for lack of a better translation. Then at the beginning of the 21st century, specifically in 2006, it became, it transitioned into, it incorporated another element, which is ethics. So it had a civic and ethics competencies approach, and the name and the orientation of the subject matter became civics and ethics education. And a few years later, the model, the educational model, was competency-based, and it's still, we still preserve the subject matter, the independent subject matter within the curriculum, but it became a cross-curricular way of teaching civics and citizenship education. So this means that math teachers, geography teachers, physics teachers had to somehow manage to teach ethics and citizenship within their contents and within their practice, somehow. So returning to our original question, what are the implications of ICCS results for citizenship, curriculum reforms, and other things? So I'm going to speak about 3 levels of information or implications for citizenship education programs, then for research, and at the end for teacher training and teacher curriculum. The implication for citizenship curriculum reforms, we have to take into fact that mainly what was used or has been used is the framework. As a key point, for instance, in 2000, the ICCS 2009 cycle, the framework was used at the beginning of 2010, 1 year later. So we had the results, but they were not really used. it was mostly the framework. So it was used to identify key concepts within this framework and compare them to what the ongoing curriculum of civic education was teaching the students. And then that information was used to develop proposals for further or future curriculum and program updates. Then in 2016, the framework was more systematically and organized, was used in a more systematic and organized way because it was reviewed by the Public Education Secretariat that had this technical advisory group, you might call it, that included teachers and subject matter experts. So they together reviewed the 2016 ICCS framework, and in 2019 the curriculum for this subject matter was updated. And it emphasized on three specific things. First, personal identity, the exercise of freedom and rights for citizens. Then, secondly, for inclusive and peaceful coexistence within equality and interculturality. And thirdly, for democratic citizenship. But everything was going okay until school lockdowns. So how did Mexico implement a revised and updated curriculum for civic and citizenship education within these circumstances? Well, it was not done only for civic and citizenship education, it was done for all subject matters, but the government launched a strategy to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, and it was called Learn at Home, because obviously we were all at home. So this strategy involved video recordings that were broadcasted during the 41 weeks of the 2020 and 21 cycle, school cycle. It was broadcasted through 5 television channels. It was a national coverage, and in total for primary education there were 369 video recordings, and for secondary instruction there were 451 video recordings that included, of course, real-life teachers teaching the lessons. So it was broadcasted 24 hours a day. It was organized if you were a student that usually went to school in the morning, you could take classes in the morning, but if you missed the lesson, there was like another round of the videos during the day and the week. So it was a 24-hour thing. Still, you can get access to those videos in 1 or 2 national channels. So they're still out there. So the implications in the second level for research. In this level, we have independent, statewide, and national secondary analysis research project that have been done using ICCA's 2009 and 2016 data. But there are, of course, other studies, national studies that concern this topic, and we collect information through different types of instruments, including surveys, of course, the curriculum knowledge assessments, which are cognitive tests, and some questionnaires. So there are different efforts being done within research. Teacher training. This topic is very interesting because teacher training the responsibility relies on the colleges, teacher training pre-service, teacher training colleges. So if you want to be a teacher of civic education, of math, of geography, or any other subject matter, you have to go through these colleges. So they are responsible for the initial training. But there is a big gap within the programs that are being taught to these teachers and the programs that are being taught to students. We have had, in the last decade, very significant changes in reforms and changes in the programs, even in the underlying theoretical principles of the educational model in the country. So 2013 was a big reform. 2017 there were some changes. 2019 there was significant change, and this year in August it was a big surprise because the educational programs for all subject matters completely changed. So the teachers are not being updated on these programs through the teacher training colleges. They're being updated on the fly. But it's interesting because teachers, they perceive themselves as having strong knowledge, a strong knowledge base of the pedagogical and the theoretical principles behind civic education and civic education teaching. And they also acknowledge that they do not have the competencies that are needed to teach the children, or they are very aware of their situation. So to end my presentation, I'm gonna just mention 4 conclusions and key insights of this information. The first one being that ICCS, as I mentioned at the beginning, the frameworks are the elements that are most widely used for curriculum revisions, for reforms and updates. Even more than data is not really used, unfortunately. It's so rich and so it could be so powerful and useful for the very well-oriented reforms, but until now, it has not really been used. But the frameworks have been. There is a strong but very disaggregated research efforts within the country. And this is in 2 levels, as independent researchers, but also the educational decision makers and institutions, universities, Secretariat of Education. It's not systematic, but it's there. And definitely efforts to articulate, disseminate information of the results are much needed in the form of policy briefs, infographics, workshops. We have to, yesterday we were listening to the first key conference. We need more knowledge brokers, that was the term. So, and it is very true. And of course, the results are an essential part for public discussion of what is the role of schools within this topic of civic and citizenship and education. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm plugging in this book for further information. This information of Mexico is a chapter of the Influences book, but there's a chapter for Italy, there's a chapter for Slovenia, and many other countries that participated in the study. It was published last year, so if you scan that QR code, you can get direct access to the book. It's an open access. So thank you very much.